Norbert Elias's The Civilizing Process, über den Prozess der Civilization, is a landmark sociological work that investigates the historical development of manners, self-control, and social structures in Western Europe. Published in 1939, Elias's book remains a cornerstone in historical sociology, offering a profound analysis of how societal norms and behaviors evolved from the medieval period to the modern age. By tracing the transformation of human behavior and societal structures, Elias illustrates how the civilizing process is deeply tied to changes in power dynamics, state formation, and individual psychology. Context and background. Norbert Elias, 1897–1990, a German sociologist, wrote The Civilizing Process during a period of intense political turmoil in Europe. The rise of fascism, the breakdown of democratic institutions, and the onset of World War II heavily influenced his intellectual landscape. Elias fled Nazi Germany and wrote much of his work in exile in England. Despite the turbulent context, Elias crafted a detailed historical and sociological analysis that sought to explain long-term social transformations rather than focusing on immediate political crises. Elias was critical of contemporary sociological theories that separated historical and sociological analysis. Instead, he argued that historical changes in human behavior and social structures were deeply interconnected. In The Civilizing Process, Elias integrates historical documentation, psychological insight, and sociological theory to create a holistic framework for understanding social change. Core thesis and key arguments. The central thesis of The Civilizing Process is that changes in social behavior, manners, and self-restraint in Western societies are not random, but follow a discernible pattern driven by historical processes of state formation and the monopolization of power. Elias argues that, over centuries, societies moved from less regulated impulsive behaviors toward increasing self-control, refinement, and sensitivity to others. Elias identifies two key interrelated processes. 1. The development of social restraint and manners. Elias traces how norms around behavior such as eating, bodily functions, and expressions of emotion have evolved since the Middle Ages. Using historical etiquette manuals, he demonstrates how behaviors that were once acceptable, such as eating with one's hands or openly displaying bodily functions, gradually became stigmatized. Over time, people internalized these rules and self-restraint became an automatic part of their behavior. Number 2, the formation of the modern state. The second key process involves the development of centralized states and monopolies on violence. As feudal societies transitioned to centralized monarchies and eventually to nation-states, the state gained control over violence, taxation, and administration. This process reduced the frequency of personal feuds and violent confrontations, fostering a need for self-control and diplomacy among individuals. The role of etiquette manuals. One of Elias's most compelling methods involves the analysis of historical etiquette manuals. These texts, written by authors like Erasmus of Rotterdam and others, provided rules for proper behavior, table manners, bodily conduct, and emotional control. Elias demonstrates how these manuals reflect broader social changes, as they were designed not just to guide individuals, but to enforce societal expectations of acceptable behavior. For example, rules regarding eating, e.g., using cutlery instead of hands, refraining from speaking with a full mouth, became markers of social distinction. Over time, adherence to these rules was not merely about external appearances, but became internalized as a matter of personal identity and self-respect. The civilizing process and psychological changes. Elias emphasizes that the civilizing process is not merely about outward behavior, but involves deep psychological transformations. As societal expectations for self-control and restraint increased, individuals developed an internal superego, or conscience. This internalized self-restraint became an essential part of modern identity. One of Elias's key contributions is his focus on the relationship between social structures and individual psychology. He argues that individuals do not act in isolation, but are shaped by networks of interdependence, which he calls figurations. These figurations are dynamic relationships between individuals and groups that evolve over time, influencing both societal norms and personal behavior. Violence, power, and monopolization. In Elias's view, the reduction of overt violence in social interactions is not a sign of innate moral progress, but a result of the monopolization of violence by centralized states. During the medieval period, feudal lords frequently engaged in personal disputes and acts of violence. However, as monarchies consolidated power, the use of violence became increasingly restricted to the state and its representatives, e.g., armies and police forces. This monopolization of violence forced individuals to resolve conflicts through negotiation, diplomacy, and nonviolent means, fostering the development of what Elias calls a civilized habitus. In this sense, civility is not a moral achievement, but a byproduct of social and political structures. The long-term perspective. One of Elias's greatest strengths is his long-term historical perspective. He avoids attributing social change to single events or individuals, instead focusing on structural processes that unfold over centuries. Elias shows that the civilizing process is cumulative and uneven, with periods of progress and regression. For example, he acknowledges that the rise of fascist regimes in the 20th century represents a temporary decivilizing process, where societal self-restraint breaks down and violence reemerges as a tool of power. However, he maintains that such regressions do not negate the overall trajectory of increasing self-control and state monopolization of violence. Critiques of Elias's work. While the civilizing process has been widely influential, it has also faced criticism. Some scholars argue that Elias overemphasizes the linear and progressive nature of the civilizing process, overlooking instances of resistance, cultural diversity, and non-European contexts. Critics also point out that Elias focuses heavily on European societies, limiting the universality of his findings. Additionally, feminist scholars have argued that Elias's analysis neglects the role of gender in shaping behavioral norms and social expectations. Women's experiences of the civilizing process, especially in terms of emotional restraint and bodily control, often differ significantly from men's experiences. Legacy and influence. Despite these critiques, the civilizing process remains one of the most influential works in sociology and historical studies. Elias's ideas have inspired countless studies on state formation, social norms, and the psychology of self-restraint. His work laid the foundation for later sociologists and historians, including Pierre Bourdieu and Michel Foucault, who also explored the relationship between power, social structures, and individual behavior. Elias's concept of figuration continues to be relevant in contemporary sociological research, emphasizing the interconnectedness of individuals and societies. His analysis of manners, etiquette, and state power offers valuable insights into modern debates about social behavior, cultural norms, and the role of state authority. Conclusion. Norbert Elias's The Civilizing Process provides a sweeping analysis of how Western societies transitioned from medieval norms of impulsive behavior and frequent violence to modern ideals of self-restraint and civility. By linking psychological changes with historical processes of state formation and social interdependence, Elias offers a nuanced understanding of long-term social change. His work continues to shape sociological thought, reminding us that the behaviors we consider natural are deeply rooted in historical and social processes. Whether analyzing contemporary political movements or the evolution of social norms, Elias's insights remain profoundly relevant in understanding the complexities of human behavior and societal development.